Welcome to ThoughtConnected and another Associate Insight. My name is John Munro and I'm the owner-founder of ThoughtConnect. Today I'll be speaking to Leanne Folkers of Folkers Consulting. Leanne has been an associate with the ThoughtConnect group since 2017. Leanne has literally decades of experience in the development, implementation and auditing of work health, safety, quality, environment and injury management system. Hi Leanne, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, thanks. The decade thing makes me sound a bit old, or decade, but that's okay.
It makes us all sound old, sorry about that. Literally days of experience. Can you talk a little bit about yourself to start off? What's your background?
Okay, well I started back in the early 90s in heavy manufacturing with BHP as a rehab consultant, and then I became a HR generalist and an injury management advisor for the BHP Steel Products Division in Adelaide. So that was where I started.
Yep.
Interesting times. Not long after I was working for them, the health and safety legislation became quite prominent within South Australia, and a lot of organisations had to develop systems that didn't exist before. So that's where I kind of cut my teeth on developing and implementing systems for health and safety.
Yeah, that's great. So in the mid-90s you had a career break and you had a son, so you have been a working mother, and with all the challenges of running your business from that perspective?
Well, I was employed during that time, but then I wanted to go back to work part-time, which was a little bit difficult back then in the mid to late 90s. And so I just took up contract work. So I did a bit of change management work because of my HR background. I did some employee relations work, redesigning the contracts of employment for, of all organisations, British Aerospace. So that was interesting. Audited work covers own work health and safety management system. Yeah, so I've been inside that business as well before it was split into Return to Work SA and Safe Work SA.
Mm-hmm. And you also spent some time in the banking system.
Yeah, that was really interesting. I was actually about to catch a plane to go to Nepal with my 3-year-old son, and I was busy negotiating conditions of employment, and I was thinking I was going to go and take up employee relations as a role. But when I got in there, their health and safety needed work, and so again, here I was going, developing health and safety systems and injury management systems, not just for a South Australian company, but for St George Bank nationally. So
a really broad level of experience across a lot of areas.
Yeah, I've been very lucky. Yes.
So with such a broad base of experience, just can we settle that down a little bit and talk about your areas of specialty?
Okay. Well, I guess not just because of my background, but because of what I'm like. I do like developing systems. I like seeing opportunities to do things differently. And after many years of having done this, one of the things I've learned is to try and cut down on paperwork, because that can be an absolute nightmare coming out of a bureaucratic environment. I certainly know when too much is too much.
Mm. Yeah.
But apart from that, I guess auditing and emergency response systems, but more recently, because of the increase in compliance requirements, I'm doing a lot more work with organisations who are submitting tenders.
Mm-hmm. And you've even broadened out, I understand, to coaching, mentoring, and engaging people more in the WHS process.
It's been a feature of how I've had to operate my entire working life, which has been to engage others to help me to write these systems, because I don't know the ins and outs of everyone's business, but I know the ins and outs of work health and safety. And by working closely with middle management and the doers of the process, you get to really understand what works well and what doesn't work so well. So that's been a strong emphasis for me. And also working with injured workers. That can be really tricky. You're dealing with emotions, you're dealing with work performance and all sorts of stuff. And I've had some really great successes coaching and mentoring not just injured workers, but the managers of injured workers are getting some fantastic outcomes.
Yeah, so you're looking at making WHS more than just a program and a piece of legislation, but moving people into the equation.
Absolutely, because they're the ones that are going to make it or break it.
So after a career in employment, you decided to go out on your own and start your own business. Obviously,
Yep.
you're preeminent in what you do, but how did you get started and what made you decide to strike out on your own?
I guess after 25 plus years in the corporate environment, which I'm ultimately grateful for because I learnt so much, I guess I found myself in a senior management environment where I was writing reports and reports and reports. And I went, you know what, this is not driving me anymore. What was the thing that I wanted to really do, and my real passion was to make a difference. And I was getting too far away from where I could make a difference. So small business and working with small business allows me to get back to that point.
Yeah, and you're using all different types of modus, face-to-face, so Zoom, online.
Yeah, well, I guess one of the things that I wanted to get to was a place where I could have a bit more autonomy, freedom, work anywhere, anytime. And I guess I'm lucky with the advent of technology. I do a lot of my work by Zoom. I don't have to be face-to-face in front of people all the time because of what I do, but I can engage with them using technology, and it's fantastic.
So in simple terms, for someone listening in for the first time and getting to understand a little bit about you, in relation to what you do, why is it so important?
It's about the minimisation of risk, okay? That's the bottom line. That's why we in business do a lot of what we do. It's a governance requirement, so there are, I guess, higher expectations of small business in terms of conducting themselves as a responsible entity. So you've got to have your insurances, you've got to have your licenses, you've got to have some systems and procedures, and health, safety and environment responsibility needs to be embedded in there as well. The other thing, I guess, that keeps coming up, and I hear it from small business owners, is they don't want to be responsible for having to make a phone call to someone's partner or family or children to let them know that their significant other has been injured or worse, killed in a workplace accident. We've seen a decrease in workplace injuries over time, and I think it's in part due to this raising awareness of having to do something and put things in place. So if I can help make that happen, then that makes me happy.
Yeah, that's great. So what are some of the common myths that you come across when you go into somebody's business or division or organisation?
Okay, people think just because they've got this lovely manual on the shelf or in their computer system that they're doing the good things about health and safety. The fact of the matter is, if you're not actually filling out some forms at some point in time and showing what you're doing, you're actually not doing it. So if you don't actually do health and safety or work health and safety and environment stuff and have pieces of paper to show what you're doing, then if something does go wrong, as far as the law is concerned, if it's not documented, you haven't done it. So that's one of the myths. The other myth is too, and I've worked with a number of companies tendering for work, they think they can get by with kind of gilding the lily about how much information they actually have. But if that party then comes in and says, hey, you've told us you've got this great work health and safety management system that incorporates environment and quality, we want to come in and audit you and have a look, and that's when they go, ooh, right, now I'm in trouble.
Yeah.
So you've got to have that stuff around, and you've also got to have your workers engaged. You've got to be doing it as part of your business activities.
So can you help us also by running through how an appointment or how a process would go when you first meet a client and then progress to help them?
Generally speaking, a client has a requirement, and it's usually because they're tendering for work. So I go in there and ask them what it is that they do have or don't have, and then we work out whether we want to build on what they've got or we start from scratch. To be honest, it's actually a lot easier to start from scratch. And then we work through the process of how it is they want me to engage with them. So it's very much client-driven in terms of timeframes and priorities. And then after that point, when the system's been built, my role is to support and coach them through implementation. And in a number of cases, I end up staying on the books and just doing snippets of work throughout a year. and auditing their systems, helping with their toolbox meetings and whatever other business requirements come up. So I enjoy the long journey, but if they just want a system, that's fine.
So it's fairly broad, some of the areas that you can go through, so you can have short-term and also long-term processes to help a client in the long process, which I think is important. So what do you think are your unique skills that make you different from others that are going around in the marketplace? So what is your superpower that you bring to clients to help them be successful in this space?
Well, firstly, I don't wear my underpants outside my clothes. I think it's relationship building. I've been very successful partnering with clients and working at their pace and understanding what they need. I think the key is I make it very clear up front that they know their business. I know how to document systems. So I rely very heavily on working with them. And I guess through that process, we establish up front this level of respect for each other's expertise and knowledge. And then as time goes by and they see the outcome of the work that's coming and how things are coming together, then that demonstrated capability that I can bring to the business allows us to build a relationship based on trust and respect.
That's really important, really important. So you've been running a successful small business, micro business for some time now. So what would be the best tip you've got for other micro businesses and consultants, small businesses who are looking at this to take their idea and their passion and move it forward?
When I initially started, I found that networking with people in my own industry and own area of work was invaluable. Often consultants have a little bit more work than they can handle, or perhaps they've been approached by someone in an area they don't really feel they're comfortable working in. And that's how I got really my first referrals. The other thing that I found invaluable when I first started was join a networking group, any networking group. People in networking groups have friends who have friends who have friends, and there's bound to be people in there that could utilise your skill and knowledge base. And then the path that I'm actually really starting to click into now is using a platform like LinkedIn. So my personal profile's up there. I'm building on my business profile. And I've also found myself a networking group of professionals, which is enabling me to keep pace with changes in other parts of the business environment. Because I think working alone, you can start to get a bit narrow-minded and you miss out with all the change that's happening out and about in industry generally.
So what are some of the things that a small business would start getting alarm bells about that they would then be saying, right, I need to be speaking to someone like Leanne?
Generally speaking, it will be at a point when you're an employer and you're employing people. Once you employ people, you then have a responsibility to mitigate risk associated with their employment. God forbid that something should go wrong, because if it does, it's a very long and expensive process. It'll probably take somewhere between 5 and 6 years to hit the courts, and probably $1 million later you might have something settled. So there's that part of it. The other way in which people engage with me is because they want to have working relationships and contractual relationships with government, large corporate businesses, property management groups, or civil construction companies, and they actually need paperwork and they need help with their tender submissions. They need assistance with things like just writing them. 25 plus years of being in corporate, I'm actually really good at writing. So I can help submit some very high level tender submissions, and I have yet to lose a tender submission. So that's a good start for me.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well done. So what about a couple of the things in people's background that people need to tick off when they're looking for a WHS expert with that extra work? Because there's a number of them around. There's a number of who are on LinkedIn, advertising and so on. But what are the really key points that somebody looking to engage someone like you needs to look at and tick off?
It's not critical that your health and safety consultant knows your business. So don't use that as the yardstick. Use the yardstick of what is their approach to systems and documentation. Can I actually develop a relationship with this person? Because not everyone can work with everybody else. That's a reality. Some people click better than others. If you really want to keep your documentation down, try and look for someone with a fairly pragmatic and practical approach, and somebody who is able to engage all through the levels of your business, right from the business owner down to the guys on the shop front floor. And, you know, if you can get those guys on board and your consultant can relate to them, then you've got half the battle won.
Yeah,
So
it's not easy making WHS something of interest, and I think that's certainly one of the things that you bring to the table is that pragmatic approach, but making it interesting and making them understand how important it is to their safety. It's crucial.
yeah, I was talking with this is a little example. I was talking with a company the other day and they said, oh, I can't get my guys to fill out the paperwork. And I said, look, have you thought about some kind of incentive system that has value for them? So we talked about the kind of guys that worked in the organisation. And I said, have you thought about offering up raffle tickets for every good thing they do? Every time they fill out a safety report or they start using the safety system, give them a raffle ticket. And then at your quarterly toolbox meeting, you can raffle off a meat tray, you know? So, you know, make it a bit of fun, make it a bit of a competition. Or another company, we throw around lollies when we do safety quizzes. So if you get the answer right, you get lollies, and there's lollies going left, right and centre.
Yeah, it's taking it from being something that's onerous and dry to something that they get value from straight away. Really important.
Absolutely, absolutely. You've got to find the fun somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Just finally, you mentioned networking and mentoring and so on. Why are you part of the ThoughtConnect group?
I think I mentioned before, it's about spending time with other professionals and keeping abreast of what's happening out in businesses in the environment in which you operate, and having that broadest perspective around what's happening. It's also nice to have people that you can throw around ideas with, who are operating with a number of small businesses, and they could, not only can they give you leads, but they can give you stories about what's happening elsewhere, what's working, what's not working, which gives you some ideas for openings to go and assist organisations and businesses. And I guess there's also a number of interesting speakers that ThoughtConnect group put in front of the group. So it's sharpen my pencil around my insurances, for example, and they're all up to date and looking great. But also the mentoring that I get from yourself, John, is invaluable. So I can see my business moving forward and growing at the pace that I want to grow it at, because you're also willing to work at my rate as well. So that's what I think.
Thank you. Thanks very much. And again, thanks very much for being part of the group. How can we get in contact with you? How is somebody who's looking at this, how can they get in contact with you and in touch and talk?
Well, there's my profiles on LinkedIn, which is Leanne Folkers and Folkers Consulting. Have a look at there, see what's underneath those two different pages in terms of information. And I guess to start the inquiry, because I am working abroad a lot, by email would be the best way to start. Yeah. And then we can use technology for conversations like this.
Thank you very much for your insights today. I've really appreciated it. Thanks again for being such an important part of ThoughtConnect. If you didn't get the full details of Leanne's contact numbers and so on, you can always visit the ThoughtConnect webpage. And thanks very much again for listening to ThoughtConnect.com.au. And thank you again, Leanne.
Thanks very much, John.
Chat again.